In today's webinar, we will be focusing on endpoint management solutions, which has different product portfolios under management and security. I would like to give a brief note about the products which are present under endpoint and security. We have tools like Vulnerability Manager Plus, Patch Manager Plus, Browser Security Plus, Device Control Plus, OS Deployer, and Mobile Device Manager, which are taking care of their own native requirement as a standalone tool. However, Desktop Central is a complete unified endpoint management tool, which has all these features under a single roof. I would say Desktop Central is a suite of all these products supported under one web console. Apart from this, if you have a major requirement for managing only third-party applications, I would recommend Patch Connect Plus. Patch Connect Plus is a simple component which can be installed in SCCM and deploy the third-party patches through SCCM. Our organization has completely adopted remote work culture. This can be challenging for IT admins who now have to consider various factors before initiating a patch task for a distributed workforce. Some of those factors are bandwidth constraint, keeping the end users informed about the patch task, time constraint while applying these patches, reboot schedule, and troubleshooting. Let us take a look on how we can include these factors and create a patch routine to suit the work from home scenario. I'm considering a live example to understand the work from home scenario better. It would be easier for us to correlate these examples as we suggest multiple methods to manage and patch the endpoints remotely in the upcoming slides.
Muted. Unmuted. Muted. Unmuted. Muted.
As we can see from the picture, each comes with its own requirement in terms of number of endpoints managed, bandwidth, and the mode of connectivity. So the IT team now has to figure out the ways to test the newly released patches, deploy them periodically to all the endpoints, and monitor them. Let's take a look at how John can handle both the situation with Desktop Central features. Type of users that John would have to cater to. is we will get forward discussing more about also and look at what are all these sessions will be recorded and it will be made available in the below mentioned website, which is www.manageengine.com/EMS/free-training. All the registered participants will receive an email with the recorded training video. If you're interested in the upcoming training sessions, please use the same link to register for it. You can also attend our free training series and climb your certificate on completing the series of courses. Patch management for distributed workforce. Before we start the training, I would want to quickly take you through the agenda for the day. At first, we will have an overview of what is patch management and its features, followed by its architecture in understanding how Desktop Central works. Following this, we will be discussing about the effective ways in which you shall manage endpoints which are distributed in various geographical locations. We will also be discussing about the strategic planning in managing these endpoints and network access control. Concluding the session with most frequently asked questions with answers. During the last webinar, most of our customers have raised some valuable questions. We have collated those information and added them into our today's question session, and I will be explaining them to you in detail. During the training session, if you come across any questions, feel free to use the chat option to chat with our expert team. We will collect all the questions raised during the session, and they will also be published for the larger audience. We will be using Desktop Central build version 10.0.678 for this presentation, and this application supports all the browsers. So here comes an important question. What is Desktop Central? Desktop Central is a unified endpoint management solution that ensures all your endpoints are secure and enable the users to use them effectively for business. A popular research analyst called Forrester defines UEM as follows: a product that provides a centralized policy engine for managing and securing employee laptops and mobile devices from a single console. In unified endpoint management, you can manage endpoints in a traditional IT management fashion. This includes patch management, application management, configuration deployment, OS deployment, tools for troubleshooting, and automate the day-to-day routine management activities. Similarly, endpoints can also be managed with modern management. All modern operating systems support modern management. It supports features like geofencing, geo-tracking for your laptops, and distribute store applications, profile distribution to enforce restrictions, operating system reset and recovery. Can you guess a popular operating system when I say modern operating system? Yes, it's Windows 10. Windows 10 is a classic example in which we can manage both traditional and modern management. Desktop Central can manage both the worlds of traditional and modern from a single console. Hence, with Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management Solution, you will be able to manage desktops, laptops, mobile phones, tablets, servers, point of sale devices, and browsers from a single console. Desktop Central is recognized for Best Unified Endpoint Management Tool of 2019 as reviewed by customers in Gartner Peer Insight, Customer's Choice Award. We are also recognized for Unified Endpoint Management in Magic Quadrant for the second consecutive year, and we are recognized for both traditional and modern management. And these are the features that you can leverage when you're using Desktop Central as a unified endpoint management solution. We have patch management that takes care of operating system and third-party application patching. We have application management, asset management, and configurations. In fact, if you're following our training schedule, we will be talking about this in our next sequence. You can manage other functions including mobile device management for iOS, Android, Windows, and Chromebooks. And then we have modern management, which is for Windows and Mac machines. You can enable functions like geo-tracking, geofencing for your laptops that you can perform complete or corporate wipe. You can also put them on kiosk mode, distribute store applications, and manage profile distribution. And then we have OS deployment, where you will be able to create a single master image of any operating system and deploy it to multiple machines. Now, these are all the features that are offered within the Unified Endpoint Management Suite. Have you ever wondered what are all the components that you need to run to use this application? There are essential as well as optional components. The Desktop Central Server is the central component that you will need to install, which provides the interface to the management console. The agent is also an essential component, so you need to install the agent on all the machines that you're planning to manage. There is another component called the notification server, and it's quite an interesting component, which we'll be talking about this once we get into the product. When we look at the optional components, we have a distribution server, which serves as a repository for patches, software, scripts that you have deployed to the machines in the remote office. We can create a unique replication policy for each location as per the bandwidth requirement. And then we have secure gateway server, which is quite useful if you're going to manage machines that are not a part of a LAN or connecting over the internet. In case if you want to have a high availability, you can make use of the failover server, which is separately licensed. Moreover, you can also use a language pack to list the web console in your preferred language. Supported operating systems. Desktop Central supports 3 operating system platforms for now, which is Windows, Mac, and Linux. Please find the list of supported operating systems on the screen. The application server runs on the Windows platform, but you can manage the endpoints with Windows or Mac or Linux operating systems. In case if you have any questions, you can always reach out to a support by using the below mentioned email ID, which is desktopcentral-support@manageengine.com. Agent installation. So Desktop Central is running on a client server model, which means you need to have the agent installed in all your endpoints to manage them. So to facilitate agent installation, we recommend three methods. One is through a group policy startup script in your Active Directory. You can simply download the application setup and push it using a GPO. We do have automatic agent installation directly from the web console. You can add multiple domains and choose the machines from those domains and push out the agent to them. We also have scripts that you can use to install the agent. Alternatively, you can download the agent manually and execute the setup directly on the machine, and it should then automatically report back to the server. And we will be talking about agent installation in greater detail in our upcoming training sessions. If you're interested, please do subscribe for our upcoming training sessions. And now we are stepping into the core part of this webinar, which is patch management. We offer support for 1,000+ applications in Desktop Central that includes Windows, Mac, and Linux. And we also support 500+ third-party applications. You shall navigate to the mentioned URL on the screen to identify each and every application that are supported within Desktop Central. Based on the use cases, a lot of customers had questions on which updates are supported by Desktop Central Patch Management. We support security-only updates, monthly rollups, cumulative updates, feature pack updates, optional updates, definition updates, and the automatic handling of service stack updates. We do support the extended security updates for the end-of-life operating systems like Windows 7, Windows 2008, and 2008 R2 servers. When it comes to server patching, we support patching for Windows servers and Linux servers with security and non-security updates. As you all know, the latest feature pack, which is currently on most of the machines, is 20H2. So once a feature pack is released, service or support will be available for 18 months to 30 months based on the edition of Windows 10 that you're running, and using Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management, you will be able to automate these feature pack deployments. We will be seeing more information about the feature pack deployment as well, and we can show you how to automate the process under the questions module. Let's take an overview on how Microsoft recommends patching for customers' environment. As you all know, second Tuesday of every month is considered to be the Patch Tuesday for Microsoft. During this time, Microsoft releases a lot of security and non-security updates. So most of the customers considers only the security updates and ignores the non-security updates. As you can see in the image, this is how Microsoft test and deploy patches in their testing environment, whereas this is how it is actually being tested in customers' environment too. So we would always recommend to give high priority to critical security updates, but post that, at least on a third week or the fourth week, we strictly recommend you to deploy all the required patches in order to achieve the fully patched recommended state of Microsoft, which will keep your environment healthy. Let us also have an overview of the patch management architecture. So whenever a patch is released, it will be made available in the vendor sites. Our crawler team repeatedly prompts the internet to draw the vulnerability information from the vendor sites. Once the download is completed, the patches will be tested in our environment. We have a wide range of testing environment from Windows XP to Windows 2019 servers. And in fact, for Mac and Linux, we do have a separate set of testing mechanism. We also test the third-party application patches as well. And this testing involves whether a patches has been successfully installed, the compatibility and the applicability check of the patches will be tested during the process, and then it will be published to the central patch repository. Please be informed that we populate only the patch information like KB number, download URL, and the applicability logic of the patches which are released in Microsoft baseline for the current month. The desktop central server running in customer's environment subscribes to the central patch repository periodically. And once the process is completed, the client machines will be scanned in order to identify the missing patches. And after identifying the missing patches, Desktop Central Server would directly download the required patches from the vendor site. And then the managed computers, based on from where they are connected, they can be allowed to download the patches from the central server or from the internet directly. However, you will have controls to define the deployment day and time. Now let us take a look at how the endpoints can be managed in distributed workforce scenario. As we have mentioned in the examples, there are two types of users John would have to cater to. Let's analyze them one by one. Patching roaming users. First of all, let's take a look at the users who are connected over the internet, or so-called the roaming users. There are two ways in which these users can be managed. One is through a secure gateway server. The domain users can connect to the secure gateway server. Thereby, you don't have to expose the desktop central server to the internet. So all the communication between the agent and the desktop central server would occur through the secure gateway server. I'm going to take you to the web console of Desktop Central and show you how to configure the secure gateway server. So this will prevent the exposure of Desktop Central server directly to the internet by serving as an intermediate between the WAN agents and the Desktop Central server. So this is the web console of Desktop Central server. And in order to introduce a secure gateway based communication to Desktop Central, we need to modify the NAT settings under admin. And then you have to search for the NAT settings, which is available under the server settings. And then we have to add the FQDN of the secure gateway server against the public FQDN under the NAT device. Post which, please navigate to admin, secure gateway server under the security settings, whereas you can download and install the secure gateway on the machine in a demilitarized zone. So after configuring the secure gateway server, it should be reachable via the public IP or the FQDN address which you have configured in the NAT settings. This will prevent the exposure of Desktop Central server directly to the internet by serving as an intermediate server between the Desktop Central server and the roaming agents. And this is how you can download and install the secure gateway server. Let's go back to the presentation. And there is also a second category of roaming users via internet. And they are the remote office users who are connecting from the work from home scenario. And most of the remote offices will have a distribution server to mediate the primary Desktop Central server and the agent. And usually Desktop Central or the distribution server will be configured in a local network. So hence exposing the main server or the distribution server to the internet is not a best practice. Instead, you shall change the mode of communication for those remote offices to allow a direct communication. Let me explain you how to change the mode of communication for each branch offices. So back to the web console, and when you navigate to admin and scope of management, and that's where you see the entire summary of missions you're managing, as well as the branch offices you have created. Now, if you would like to change the mode of communication for one of the branch office, you have this option to modify and change the communication type as direct communication, or it can be changed through distribution server or vice versa. So by this way, we are now allowing the endpoints to directly connect the secure gateway server instead of the distribution server. And this is how we can manage the roaming users patching via internet. And the important thing is, on an unplanned patching deployment activity, the entire VPN and the internet bandwidth might be completely utilized, resulting in bandwidth overhead. And even other business critical activities might get interrupted. So considering the work from home situation, we can solve this by carefully selecting the patches and excluding bulk updates like feature pack update. Let's go back to the presentation. The next type of users are remote patching users for work from home scenario. So Desktop Central offer a feature called direct download, and this is to conserve bandwidth for the above mentioned VPN users. The agent can now directly download the patches from the internet without any dependency of the Desktop Central server. And there are some prerequisites to enable the direct download, where you need to ensure you're running on a latest build version of Desktop Central, and a simple configuration has to be deployed to allow the VPN connected work from home endpoints to download the required patches directly from the internet. We have created templates to enable this. So let me show you how this can be done in the Desktop Central web console. Back to the web console, and you can navigate to threats and patches if you're on the latest version, or you can see this as patch management and go to deployment, disable automatic updates, and you can see a configuration named enable agents to directly download the patches. So all you need to do is create this configuration, target the group of computers to which you need to enable the direct download, and then you can deploy that configuration immediately. So once the configuration is deployed, the direct download feature will be enabled, and the agents can directly download the patches from the internet. And we have also added a snapshot for the number of patches that is used for the other operating systems as well. So for Windows, we have seen how to deploy this through the secure configuration. And for Mac, you can use this patch ID to enable or disable the direct download. Now, the next scenario is back to Office. There are certain things that an administrator should look for when the missions are back to Office, right? So you can verify the quarantine, the non-compliant missions, updating the unpatched applications, and deploying feature pack if they're outdated, because you might have not deployed the feature pack when the missions are in work from home, as it's a large upgrade package, and deploying updates based on users availability. And we are going to discuss these situations one by one. Previously, we have seen how to manage the endpoints during the work from home scenario, and now let's create a patch routine for back to office missions. So the first objective will be enabling network access control for the non-compliant missions and identifying critical applications to patch them in priority. And then to create a system restore point for all the work from home missions. Hence, when in case of experiencing any challenges through patch deployment tasks, we are safe to restore the backup. And that is the primary objective of creating a system restore point. And the next objective would be to keep the end users informed about the patching schedule so that they can be prepared. Also, to test the newly released patches on a pilot group of missions before deploying them to the bulk computers. And based on the testing results, approve the patches and deploy them to highly vulnerable systems and to generate reports for all the above mentioned activities. So let's take a look at them one by one. Network access control. So network access control is used to tighten the network security by restricting the endpoints that don't satisfy the complaint requirements of an organization. It enables the system administrator to allow or restrict the access to organization's network for the endpoints that fails to confirm the complaint settings that are defined by an administrator. And please be informed that the network access control module is available in our desktop central build versions from 10.0.595 and above. As we take a look at this workflow, the administrator creates a policy that defines the complaint status for all the workstations in his organization. And if any of those systems is found to be non-compliant, the network resource of those systems get restricted or the system is said to be quarantined. And by default, the complaint status of all the systems are checked automatically during every refresh cycle, which happens once in 90 minutes. And we'll also be discussing about the refresh cycle in much more detail. And whenever a machine is reconnected to the network, the complaints is also rechecked. So if the complaint is achieved or if the agent has been uninstalled, the quarantine status on those systems will also be revoked automatically. So all of these situations are captured, and let me show you how this can be done in the desktop central console. We have even published a step-by-step instruction that explains how to enable the network access control, which you can also get from our chat panelists. And first, we need to download this EMS Trust Agent. So there is a zip file which includes the EP status tester exe. Whereas if you want to test the status of the configuration you deployed, you can use this exe. Otherwise, there is this quarantine policy generator. So this is the actual tool. And once you execute that, it will allow you to configure the services that we're talking about. So for example, if you want to verify a software and you need to type the software name and the status has to be updated as exist or running, or for the other custom tags, let's say there is a registry part, and if you would like to check if it is updated or not, or if there is a specific value that has been added, you need to configure it in this tool, and the quarantine settings can be updated here. Let's say if there is this software exists, I would like to block all the network access. So I can configure the policy in such that way. And please note that this tool requires .NET 4.0 to be installed as a prerequisite. And setting up complaints policies are explained in detail here. And we can also see on how to add a software check and service checks, and the custom checks can be added as well. Also, the keyword should be uniquely identifying the application, and it must not clash with the name of the another application that is running. The system administrator can set the communication restrictions by choosing to allow or restrict the internet access. And if the system is found to be non-compliant, the following quarantine measures can be undertaken. So as mentioned, you can choose to block all the network access. You can also set the domain or the IP address that you wish to allow the quarantined machines. And further, you can also set to automatically revoke the quarantine settings when the quarantine machine loses connectivity. So you can enable this and you can create this as a policy. So once you have defined the policies for the endpoint, and once you click on this create new policy, a file will be saved as a JSON file in the JSON format. It needs to be saved as a quarantine.json format for the trusted agent to recognize it. And when prompted to update the zips, you need to ensure you're updating it automatically as you're seeing it in the screenshot here. So the machine's network communication will be restricted. And the best part is the system administrator can set the communication restrictions by allowing or restricting the access to the internet. And they're all defined in the quarantine settings here. So once this is configured, you just have to deploy this file as a configuration. And for more information about network access control, please do reach out to the supporting team so we can explain it in articles, and we can also have a separate call to discuss about this. Back to the presentation. And here is the screenshot that explains the network access control for the non-compliant machines. And the next stage is to create a system restore point for back to office endpoints. So as we explained before, there is a configuration that you need to apply to restore the systems. And let me show you how that can be applied. So you need to navigate to configurations, go to script repository, and there would be a template named enable system restore, which I have already added to the repository. And in case if you haven't added it to the repository, you can search for it here as restore, and you will be able to see that script here. Just have to select it and add it to a repository. And after adding it to the repository, you just have to deploy this as a computer configuration. Choose the machines in the target, and you can deploy it immediately. So this is how we can deploy a system restore point for the back to office machines. And the next step is to do priority patching. So, and our next agenda is to identify the critical applications. As you know, there are different patch types that comes with a different severity. So our agenda is to identify those critical applications so that we can prioritize that patching here. And we have added patch type and the severity type for all the patches. If you go to the threats and patches section and go to missing patches, here is where you can view the total number of patches that are found missing in your network. And for every patch, we have tagged the approval status, release date, and its severity. So if you would like to check only the critical applications, we have provided you an option to filter them based on the severity. So you can apply it and get it as a report. And in case if you would like to prioritize this deployment, you can just select these critical updates and deploy it manually, or you do have options to automate the critical patches as well, which we'll be explaining it in detail. And let's see what the next agenda is. All right, so we are going to test and approve those critical patches. So before you do any sort of patching, what we recommend is to completely test them on your test environment so that it will be safe for you to deploy those patches to the production environment. As you know, there are hundreds of patches that's getting released on a monthly basis. So we need to ensure they're all tested in the test lab. And let me show you how to test and approve these patches and how to deploy them automatically to the production environment. And there is also an option where you can announce the end users about this patch task activity. So going back to the web console, the first option is the announcement. So when you go to tools, we have an option called announcement where you can define a message and you can share it with the end users about the patch task that you're going to plan. So it can be for the entire group of users, or you can just share it with only for the group of computers that you're targeting. And the frequency can also be multiple times as well. So the end users are aware about the patching task that you're going to conduct. Now let's see how to test those patches. And if you go to patch management module, go to deployment, and we have something called test and approve, where you can create a test lab and you can test these patches on the test environment. So by default, every patch is tagged with an approval status. It is either approved or not approved. So in case if you have a backend team who does the testing process, and if you would like to automatically approve all the patches, you could go with automatically without testing. But if you have decided to test the patches, you will be given option to create a test lab like this. So create a group where you can group the computers, and we call that option as custom grouping. So as you can see, if you, let's say I have a HR team or an IT admin team, which I would like to group the computers. So I could use this option and I can allocate those IT admin group or the other groups for testing purpose here. And I can also define what updates has to be tested. Let's say my patching policy is to do only security and service pack. So I would prefer to update those patches alone for the test environment. And the same goes with third-party updates as well. It can be an application specific also. Let's say I have only few applications in third party, so I would like to specifically test them or specifically test the installed applications. So I can choose those packages, and the testing can also be conducted for the definition updates. If you look at the support list, there is Windows Defender, Microsoft Forefront Client Security, and then Microsoft Security Essentials, so which you can use it for testing. And we also provide support for driver updates as well. Network, sound, and video driver updates are supported. So if you would like to test them, you can enable it in the test group that you're creating. And you need to associate a deployment policy. Every configuration you create is associated with it, which will help you to fix a schedule along with the reboot policies. And we will also be explaining that in detail. So after associating a deployment policy, you can opt for approval status. Let's say a patch is deployed to my test machines, and if the deployment is successful to all of my endpoints, then those patches should be marked as approved after 2 or 3 days of time. So the reason why we are having it for 3 days is to understand or observe if those patches are causing any trouble. And if you notice any issues with your test machines, you can go back to the test group that you created. You can find out the list of patches that was installed. You can do a quick check if there is any known issues reported in the forums, and you can decline those patches. So by declining the patches, we are ensuring that they are not deploying to the other set of production environment. And that's the main reason why we are testing the patches. Because after testing, if you're identifying any issues, we need to ensure we are stopping that, and you can achieve it easily through the desktop central test and approve method. And the rest of the updates would be automatically approved. So of course, the next objective is to deploy those approved updates automatically to the production environment. And there is an option to automate that as well. And we call that as automate patch deployment. And all you need to do is create a task based on the operating system and define the criteria. Let's say if I see any security updates as approved, I would like to deploy them to my production environment. So you can use this task here. And the same goes with third party and antivirus. And you can fix a deployment policy. So I may plan to do this production testing on a 3rd week or a 4th week. So you can apply a policy here and define the target. The target can be the entire domain, in which you can filter them based on the custom groups you create, or an IP range, or a specific organizational unit, or an AD group. So you can target that and finally configure the notifications as well. So in case of any download or deployment failure, if you need a detailed report, the tool can share that information every 8 hours with a detailed report. Or the status report can also be forwarded to you as a specific format. So this is how you test and approve the patch and automate the patch deployment for the production environment. Let's go back to the presentation. And the next set of module is feature pack deployment. So as you know, Desktop Central also supports feature pack deployment. And Microsoft released these feature packs twice in a year. And the recent updates that was released is 2004 and 20H2. Now for every version of this feature packs, we have released a KB article that explains how to deploy them. Because we have enterprise and professional Windows editions. So based on the edition you manage, we have provided you options to patch them. And if it's enterprise, you need to get into the volume licensing center, download the ISO file manually, and then you need to upload it in the store location. So the Desktop Central can distribute it across your endpoints and update the feature pack. Whereas with professional, you can directly deploy it from the tool. And we have published articles for that. And you can also reach out to the support team who can share that information with you. The next set of schedule is this deployment based on users availability. And now that most of the organizations have adopted work from home, we need to ensure we are targeting those missions during the business hours or during the time of its usage. And we have a default report that explains you the activity of the users, which is available under reports, power management reports, and system uptime report that explains the computer name, the domain name, and how long the end user is up and running. And you can see the total downtime as well. So by this way, we can identify the duration to which they are live, and we can even export this as a report and add it as a custom group, and you can post missions as a schedule, so you can deploy all the patches automatically or manually. So the benefit is that you can learn the pattern of users active time in a day, so that you can plan the patch deployment activity. And even you can, as I said, you just export this as a report and upload it into the tool as a custom group, so you can directly deploy a policy for that. Hope that would be of very useful. And the next step is a patch database sync and the scanning process. Now, based on the schedule, the desktop central server will reach out to the online patch database to collect the latest vulnerability information. So once the sync process is completed, based on the 90 minutes refresh policy that we have discussed earlier, for the next 90 minutes, any mission from John's IT environment, which is reaching out to the desktop central server, will be performed a patch scan automatically. As you can see, right from the synchronization process and the scanning, both of these tasks has been automated, and all you need to do is just to ensure the proxy and the patch database settings are configured. Let's also see how to create a new set of policies for the work from home missions. So John has a couple of items to achieve, and they are to allow the users to skip the deployment, and there may be VIP users where he would like to give them access to skip it, and schedule a reboot. So there are production servers, and I would like to schedule a reboot after the patch deployment. And so let's see how to achieve these tasks in the deployment policy. So as I mentioned earlier, every configuration you create is associated with a deployment policy. And you can create n number of deployment policies like this, because you have a separate group of servers or workstations, which you might patch in a different schedule. So let me show you how to create that. Let's say I'm creating it for my servers. So I'll just name the policy for servers, and we have an option to choose a preferred week and days for deployment. So I would like to patch this production servers on a third Saturday or Sunday. So I can fix the schedule and can give the entire day for testing or deploying. So I can configure the deployment window here, during which the patches will be downloaded and deployed. In case if you want to pre-download the patches, to reduce the download time taken in this window, you have an option to enable an option called downloading patches during subsequent refresh cycle. So by enabling this, the agent will not wait for the deployment window. Rather, the patch binaries will be downloaded in the next cycle itself, which happens once in 90 minutes. So the package is already there in the client machine locally, but when the time comes, when the schedule comes up, it just focuses on deploying it. And in fact, you can wake up the computers in case if it is shut down, and if the machines are connected to a LAN, you can use this option to wake the computer and deploy the patches. And this is where you can notify the end users about the deployment with a customized message. So there will be a pop-up in the right bottom corner, and you can allow the end users to skip the deployment as well. However, you cannot allow the end users to keep skipping a patch deployment, as it might make the machine vulnerable. So you can force the deployment after a couple of days, which means you're allowing the end user to skip the deployment for 2 days, and after that, you're taking control and you're forcing the deployment on it. And as well, after the deployment is done, you can plan for further rebooting as well. And you have option to not reboot the endpoints, or you can force the reboot immediately, and you can specify the reboot time. Let's say I would like to do it on Sunday between so and so time, or you can allow the end users to postpone the reboot itself. So the end users will get an option to skip the reboot for 15 minutes or 1 hour. And if user defined time is selected, the end user himself can decide at what time the machine should be rebooted. So complete customization on pre-deployment and the reboot policy is all there in the deployment policy options. And as I mentioned, you can create a number of policies like this, and you can associate one of the deployment policy to the configuration that you create. And by this way, we can allow the end users to skip the deployment and reboot them during the specified window. And we have also attached some of the screenshots. So this is how it looks like when the users want to skip the reboot. So they will be provided an option to reboot immediately in case if it's okay, or they can use this postpone reboot option, and they can use this drop down to choose an interval. And if select time is there, they can choose their own timing. And this is to skip the reboot on a specific time. And through this way, we can also achieve deploying the patches between a specific interval. So if you look at the example, so there is a plan to deploy between 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. by John. So as I mentioned earlier, you can go back to the schedule and configure in such a way that it's set only between 6 and 9 p.m. And we can wake up and deploy the missions. There is an automatic wake on LAN that is enabled, and you can also force the reboot except the servers also, which we have explained in detail now. And this is how the force reboot window looks like after the deployment is done. So there would be a pop-up in the right bottom corner where the end users can restart now. And there would be a timeout of 5 minutes. So in case if they have to save any important information, they could utilize it. Now let's look at the patch management as a glance. So it is independent of WSS, and it's also a cross-platform patch management application that supports Windows, Mac, and Linux, and third-party applications. We can leverage various features of test and approve and automate the patch deployment task with flexible deployment policies. We can easily tweak the features to suit the patch management requirement. So this is the overview of the patch management module of Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management. We also have other modules such as software deployment, inventory, mobile device management. And let's have a look at the Desktop Central architecture now. So Desktop Central is an on-prem solution, and it supports client-server model application. You can have the Desktop Central server hosted in any one of the supported operating system. And this architecture talks about how you can manage the computers in your local area network. And here comes the important part of managing your machines from a distributed network. When it comes to wide area network, you can manage different remote locations from one single console. They can connect either over the internet or using a VPN or MPLS connections. And secure gateway server, which is added in the chart, would help to connect the machines that are present in the remote site that are connected over a direct internet connection that bridges the agent traffic to the Desktop Central server securely when they are connected over the internet. And when it comes to remote locations, we have a component called distribution server, which is used to throttle the bandwidth for the data traffic between the Desktop Central server and the remote location. You will be able to manage all your mobile devices using secure gateway server as well. And with Desktop Central, you can manage multiple domains as well as workgroups. You can also deploy a configuration targeting an Active Directory group or an organizational unit. So this is the architecture on how Desktop Central works in managing and distributing the workforce. And here comes the next important part, which is managing computers under a closed network. So what is a closed network? A network which does not have connectivity to internet or limited connectivity is what we call as a closed network. So even if you have a closed network architecture, you can still use Desktop Central to manage your endpoints. And in this case, we will be nominating a machine that has internet connection, and it will download the patches from the vendor sites, which you need to copy those patches to the Desktop Central server manually. So by this way, you will still be able to manage the computers in the closed network. And for your information, Desktop Central is available as an on-prem solution, and it is also available as a native cloud SaaS solution. In case you're looking to host Desktop Central in any one of the cloud server, you can use AWS or Azure Marketplace. So Desktop Central is made available in AWS Marketplace in Azure, and which you can use to host it. And if you require patch management as a separate product, we have a standalone tool which is called Patch Manager Plus, and this is available in both on-prem and cloud edition. Let's take a look at the ports that are used by Desktop Central server. So Desktop Central runs primarily on two ports, 8383, which is HTTPS, or 8020, that is used for HTTP connection. And all the agents talk to the server using this port. And there is another port of 8027, which is in TCP mode of communication. And this is used by the notification server. The notification server is to perform all the on-demand activities like initiating a patch scan or a remote control, etc. And apart from these two ports, there are other optional ports that you need to open. And the important ports are all listed on the screen. You can keep the respective ports open as per your requirement. And Desktop Central architecture is scalable to manage different networks and even a large network using our 90 minutes refresh policy. I will explicit this in simple terms. A Desktop Central agent communicates with the Desktop Central server every 90 minutes, and this is called an agent refresh cycle. This feature ensures that all the computers in the network contact the server periodically. And two important factors are ensured here. Network is not choked by the agent server communication, meaning bandwidth is not disturbed during this agent server communication. The performance of the server is also not affected at any time. Also, Desktop Central server has the intelligence to endure systematic streamlined communication for all the agents at regular intervals. For example, in a network of 90 computers, for each minute, only one computer will reach out to the Desktop Central server. And thereby, in case if there are 900 computers, then each minute 10 computers would reach out to the Desktop Central server. And it goes on like that for larger networks as well. So using this feature, we're ensuring a hassle-free communication from agent to server. Let's look at some of the scenarios and solutions that we have captured. So the first scenario, do I need a secure gateway server for patching machines in work from home? Yes, if the machines are not on VPN, we need to configure a secure gateway server to securely manage patch management for those endpoints. The local office machines are now at work from home. How do I make them contact the Desktop Central server? So as we discussed, if a machine is not in VPN, we need to have a secure gateway server to establish a communication to the Desktop Central server. So if they're connected via VPN, it will communicate to the central server or to the distribution server without the need of secure gateway server. Is it a good practice to expose a distribution server? No. Since you have installed the distribution server in your local network, it is not recommended to expose it. Is there a way for Desktop Central to download all the necessary patches, then restart only once for the end users? Yes, the agent will scan for the missing patches, deploy them based on a schedule, and it would check for reboot. Once all the patches are installed in the schedule, it executes a single reboot as per the policy which you have defined. When I exclude or decline a patch, is this removed from the patch management dashboard page? Yes, when you decline a patch, it will not be calculated as missing. And let me show you the selective exclusion and permanent exclusion of a patch. So as we discussed in the beginning, after you test the patches, if you would like to decline due to some issues, you can navigate to patches, decline patches section and decline it for a group of computers. Otherwise, while creating a patch deployment task, you have an option where you can decline respective applications just from the task here. So we refer this as a selective exclusion. If you just would like to patch the applications except .NET Framework, so you could use this option here. And this is also added for the third-party updates as well. Which is, there is a screenshot for selective and permanent exclusion. And the next scenario is, our business applications misbehave occasionally, and I suspect that recent patch deployment could be the cause. How can I roll back a patch? So Desktop Central do support rollback of a patch for the Microsoft updates. And for every patch, we have updated the uninstallation status. So the vendor will be updating if it is supported or not. And if it's supported by the vendor, we will be able to select those patch and we can roll back from the endpoints. While deploying the patches, I came across the below errors on multiple clients. How do I get this fixed? So these errors could be due to multiple reasons, such as file corruption is one among them. And we have a detailed troubleshooting article added into our product console that would help you to overcome the situation. And in case you face issues even after following that, you could very well reach out to the support team with the screenshots and the agent logs. So we will be able to assist you further. How do I take a patch status report for a specific group of missions before and after Patch Tuesday? So we have an option to schedule a report or generate an immediate report. Let's say if I need to get the immediate report of the patches that is released based on a date, then I can navigate to patches, and from the filters, we have given you an option called release date. So this can be on a specific date or before category or filter can be applied, and after filter can be also applied. So you can define this, so you'll be able to get the missing patches report, and this can be exported into a PDF or a CSV format. And if you would like to schedule this, we have added this options under report and schedule reports here. So you can apply the same criteria under the missing patches section, so you can get a weekly or a monthly reports as well. Let's see what the next scenario is. All right, so we are moving into the questions. How can I patch my Windows 10 machines in Bring Your Own Device setup? So first, we need the essential component, which is the Desktop Central agent. So once it is installed, we will now decide whether the machine is within the network or not. And as you know, if it's not in the network, so it would be connecting through a secure gateway server. And if it's within the network, it would directly contact the central server through which we can apply the configurations. How soon are the patches available to me after being released by Microsoft? So as soon as the patches are released, our team will start the testing process to add the checksum values, detection logic, etc. So once it is done, the patches will be released in our database, and you can expect the security updates within 12 hours of time, the rest of the updates within a maximum of 24 hours. Can we ever reach a green state in patch management? Yes. I hope you remember the full patch approach of Microsoft, which we discussed in the earlier slides. So it's about deploying the security critical updates first and the rest of the updates in the following weeks. I could see a difference in patches discovered by Desktop Central against WSys Windows updates. Why? Yes, so in case of Windows 7, 8.1 or 2008 servers or 2012 server machines, Windows updates does not show you security only updates as missing, but Desktop Central detects all such updates as missing to ensure they are updated. So WSys detects update only from its source, but Desktop Central is detecting patches from other sources such as Windows Update, Microsoft Catalog, and WSys as well. So you might see such discrepancies with WSys. How are failed patches handled in test and approve? The main reason why we are testing the patches is to see if it's causing any issues in our test machines. So if you have selected an automatic approval of patches after testing, remember patches that are successfully installed in at least one of the machine and have not failed in any machine will only be approved. So if there is a failure in test groups, it is important to focus on resolving it based on the troubleshooting articles we provide, because the same might occur for our production machines as well. So if we are able to find the root cause in the test machines and sort them, we can stop such cases happening in our production environment too. Is there a way to disable automatic updates of third-party applications like Adobe, Java? Yes, we have added some default configurations that I can show you on the console. If you go to patch management, deployment, we have disable automatic updates. And if you look at the first one, it's for Adobe Acrobat. So you can deploy this configuration to disable the automatic updates of this application. So similarly, we have also added it for the other applications as well. So in case if you would like to disable the automatic updates, you could use this configuration to enable it. How can I see what are the patches released in the patch Tuesday cycle and see all the missing systems? So we have a separate category to list the latest updates under the patches section. So if you see this, there is latest patches section, and here it will list down this month update that has been released. So you can also use this section to export a report if you would like to share it with your management. Some patches have the description of reboot may require. Why is this? So let's say you're installing a security update, which updates the DLL that has loaded in one or more processes that are required by Windows. Now, this security update cannot be completed while the DLL is loaded in the client machine. So only after the restarting of the machine or during the system startup, the patches would get deployed. So for those updates, we have added the status as may require. So here comes the end of today's patch management webinar. I would like to thank every one of you for joining this webinar in your busy schedule. You can very well rate this webinar on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is the best. You can also share a word about this webinar as well, about Desktop Central UEM solution in the below platforms. And the next training will be for Unified Endpoint Security, which is scheduled for April 14th, and you can also register for the same. If you're in need of a personalized demo about the product, you shall inform the chat team experts so they can help you to organize it. I thank you all for taking your valuable time and participating in our webinar. Have a great day ahead.